All right, everyone, welcome. Good day to wherever you're at. Welcome to our webinar titled The Death of Traditional Retirement Plans, How Pooled Employer Plans Are Revolutionizing the Retirement Landscape. Today, we're going to be talking a lot about defined contribution plans, 401k plans, 403b plans. I do want to make you aware, if you do have a question that comes up during our webinar today, you can submit those questions through the Q&A pane that are on the media player as part of today. So feel free, we'll answer as many of those as we can during the time that we've got. And for those that we don't get to, we'll follow up afterwards. By way of introduction, my name is Michael Clark. I'm a managing director at Agilis, and I'm joined today by my colleague and our CEO, Tom Cassara. We're both excited to be here with you talking about pooled employer plans. We know there's a lot of good stuff out here in this space that we hope you can get a lot out of. And part of that, you'll see, part of our enthusiasm for this, it extends beyond to just what we see as the advantages, but as a company ourselves, we've actually decided to join a pooled employer plan and did so earlier this year. And that's despite the fact that we do traditional investment consulting work, both as an ERISA 321 and an ERISA 338. There was just too many advantages to ignore here. And so we, as a company, we want to make sure that other companies can understand what pooled employer plans are about, make the assessment as to whether or not it's a good fit for them, and figure out then which pooled employer plan or PEP they want to join. This is a little bit about our company, Agilis. We've highlighted one thing in here that I think you'll see as an important point as we move through our conversation today, and that's the fact that we're not affiliated with any pooled employer plan ourselves. We don't sponsor a pooled employer plan. As I mentioned, we joined one. We're a participating employer, but we don't have an affiliation with one beyond being a participating employer in a plan. So to start our discussion today, we wanted to lay some foundational work here talking about the traditional retirement plan structure. The chart that we have here on the screen now shows just how complicated or how many parties are involved in running a traditional retirement plan. And I'll focus in on the top middle box there, that ERISA Section 402A named fiduciary. That's the fiduciary that oversees all of the other service providers, all of the other fiduciaries that are involved in running a retirement plan. And you'll see some of those are in a fiduciary capacity, others are not. Some, there may be options for them to be a fiduciary or not. But all of that funnels up, and the main responsibility is with that ERISA Section 402A named fiduciary. From a plan sponsor perspective, in a traditional retirement plan setting, then that named fiduciary, they have the responsibility for overseeing all aspects of how the plan is run, from the audit to the investment funds, which record keeper, making sure that plan administration is done correctly, processing payroll and contributions, deciding on the plan design, and ultimately the plan sponsor is responsible for making sure that the services that are being received are commensurate with the fees that are being charged. And I think many people have seen that today with litigation that's come up, alleging that fiduciaries have breached their fiduciary responsibility if there are other options or better options that would have been in plan sponsors or the plan participants' best interests. Now, as far as running a plan in the current retirement plan landscape, there's advantages and there's disadvantages. The advantages, the main advantages, is that you get total control over all the different plan design features, the service providers that are involved, the menu of investment options. The plan sponsor has all control over what goes into that. But as we all know, if you've been involved with defined contribution plans, you know that it also takes a lot of time and energy and resources to run a plan and run it correctly. So you've got the time and resources dedicated to running the plan. Maybe you have a benefits manager who's either directly responsible for some of the day-to-day operations or overseeing some of that if it's been outsourced. You have a committee that's made up of typically senior level people that dedicate time and effort into monitoring the plan. getting advice from the different service providers and making decisions. You also, because you have total control, you also have all of the risk. There's more fiduciary responsibility, more risk in running your own plan. And we mentioned the legal, the liability risk. There's plenty of litigation out there that shows you that this is an area that plaintiffs' attorneys have their eyes on for sure. So the main question then that we ask people are, do employees value what you are providing them in terms of a retirement plan, and do they appreciate this time and effort and risk that go into running the plan the way that it's supposed to be run? And that brings us to some quotes that we've never heard. We've never actually heard someone say, wow, I can't believe that what this company uses for their target date fund. I guess this just isn't the right company for me. We've also never heard anybody say, wow, if they really change our record keeper, I'm out of here. I'm leaving. And what would be the best interview question that we've ever heard, but we've never yet heard, is how many changes on average do you make to your fund lineup each year? None of those things are on employees' minds. It's not the important factor as to why they come to work every day, but they are important elements of running a retirement plan. And then to emphasize this, we looked at some data from some plansponsor.com surveys that were published recently. They said 73% of employees said they agreed or strongly agreed that they expect employers to offer a retirement plan. And of those, 90% expect some sort of retirement education to be included in that retirement plan package. So they want a retirement plan. They want the ability to save, and they appreciate it even more if there's employer money that's going in there via a match or some sort of non-elective contribution. But do they actually value the details? And we want to know from you. So we've got a few polling questions here. We'll start with this one. What % of your employees know what target date series you offer in your plan today, assuming you offer a target date series? Tom, while people are thinking through this and submitting their answers, we went through this, and you specifically went through and asked a number of people within our company when we were evaluating a pooled employer plan if they knew what target date series that we offered. I'd love for you to share your findings with everyone.
No, I did. I'm not sure I want to share the findings, though, Michael. I mean, being in the business and this is what we do as a living, I was a little taken back when I realized that the vast majority of people I asked did not know, which provider which target date series fund we were in, which really hit home for me that, we're doing a lot of work and we do an excellent job of picking funds, but maybe it wasn't being valued.
No, good. It's a good point. Let's see what the rest of you said. A lot of you are very optimistic that somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 of your employees know what target date series you're in. About 1/3 say less than 25%. If you haven't done this, it might be a useful exercise to walk around the office, ask a few people or message a few people during the day, and just get a sense for what percentage of them actually do know what funds are in their plan. That brings us to our next question, which is really, how important is any specific fund to your attraction retention strategy? Is it extremely important? Is it important, unimportant? I would say the only time that I have ever heard something like this come up is with regards to a brokerage window, where you might have some key or influential employees that insist on making their own investment decisions and want access to a brokerage window to be able to select whatever type of funds they want. Tom, what's your experience been here?
I mean, very similar. Sometimes some key executives have a preference for a fund and it remains, but typically under an M&A environment where you're merging two plans, oftentimes that you find you want to retain some of the funds from a prior one, is in a show of appreciation or a show of respect for the other fund and their choices, the other lineup.
But I'm going to guess at the end of the day, that's not going to be a determining factor on deciding retention bonuses in those situations, or
probably not.
Goodwill more than anything.
No.
Well, and it looks like our audience today agrees, right? 3/4 of them would say that having a specific fund as part of an attraction retention strategy is really unimportant. It is interesting to note that a quarter of you say that actually it is important, and I'd be curious to hear more about that in a later discussion. And then our last polling question, this one's a bit of a free response. You can answer this however you deem appropriate, but how much time does your internal staff spend managing your current retirement plan? You can put that in context of a percentage of time or a number of hours, and we realize that every organization is going to be different. You could have, factoring in your committee that meets and how often they meet, but a benefits manager or benefits staff, how much time are they spending on the retirement plan? So we'll give you a couple of minutes to jot down your responses to this. While you're doing that, the whole point that we're trying to make here is really the fact that the time and effort that you spend managing your current plan, you have to ask yourself, is it commensurate with the value that your employees place on the details of the benefits that they're receiving? And this is actually where pooled employer plans come in. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom, who's going to walk us through the details of pooled employer plans.
Okay. So we really want to focus on a little of the background on pooled employer plans and then walk into the advantages and disadvantages that they present to the plan sponsors. So just in background, the pooled employer plans are not something brand new starting in 2021. They've been around for quite a while, where different plan sponsors have come together to share resources in providing benefits. However, Secure Act freed up two major provisions. One is allowing unrelated businesses to come together, where previously it had to be related. And second is the one bad apple rule, where if there is a participating employer that has some issues, it's not going to taint the rest of the plan. And those are really two key things to help promote pooled employer plans as they go forward. So established in 2021, this was allowed for 401k plans. It was Secure Act 2.0. It then allowed 403b plans to also participate in the PEP market. And so here down below, we show a little bit of a schematic around what that looks like. Very similar to what Michael showed earlier, is that the pooled plan provider now is overseeing certain aspects of delivering that plan program, which would be choosing, and the main ones are the record keeper, the administration, and the investment management of the plan. So just another illustration of how this compares to where you are today. You have a single employer where you can have controlled group companies participating within that single employer. We're all probably somewhat familiar with the multiple employers where you have related businesses. And then here you can see the pooled employer with the unrelated businesses that would then participating in that same plan. So how does this look overall in terms of how the various elements are controlled? So in that middle section, that middle circle, is the pooled employer plan, where they're controlling decisions around auditor, plan administration, record keeping, investment management, or the lineup with that. But you also see that plan design is shaded in that box, but it's also shaded in the boxes for the various participating employers. And this is simply that the vast majority of PEPs out there will bifurcate the responsibilities in terms of plan design with the participating employer, or in other words, allow the flexibility for the participating employer to choose its match, how it wants to make that contribution, and the design around that. But the ancillary decisions around plan design are often then decided upon at the pooled employer level. Things like number of loans, or definitions of hardship, et cetera. And that's just simply to help them simplify that administration across many different participating employers. But the key elements of the design typically are going to rest with the participating employer. The other element that the participating employer will have to do, and it makes sense, is you have to provide the payroll and the contributions. So in essence, the role of participating employer within a PEP is to make sure that the money is going to the PEP in the correct amounts, and it's also to design the plan for the major impacts for the matching formula or the contributing formula for that plan. But beyond that, most decisions will rest with that pooled employer plan. Okay. So what are the advantages that this brings? Well, obviously, if you're accumulating more in terms of funds, in terms of participants, et cetera, it gives you potential for fee savings. So economies of scale make a lot of sense, especially in the investment management element of it, where you could drive down fees by virtue of having more assets at work for you. And not only is it fee savings, but also could be in terms of the level of services that are provided. So especially for smaller plan sponsors, you may be limited in terms of a record keeper and what services they would provide, whether it's through their web service or planning, et cetera. Often with a PEP, you're going to be expanding upon what that capability is. You're going to have reduced fiduciary responsibility. Okay, and this is an important one. This is one where a lot of those elements that you're responsible, Michael covered earlier in the presentation, are now going to be the responsibility of that PEP provider. And so your responsibility would turn from overseeing all the elements and being responsible basically to overseeing the PEP provider, and are they doing their job? And are they doing it well? And is it still the right fit for your organization? So it's a much different aspect of fiduciary responsibility. And then finally, obviously, your time commitment is going to come down. You're not going to be as responsible for items in terms of the administration. That's going to be outsourced to the PEP provider. You're not going to have as much time for committee meetings because now your responsibilities go from overseeing everything, probably meeting once a quarter, to overseeing how well is that PEP provider providing, which in our opinion would be probably about once a year. And then there's obviously all the things around the audit and et cetera that would then be outsourced to that PEP provider. So a significant amount of time commitment that would be presented.
And Tom, really quick before you move on there, as we've talked with a lot of employers and especially their benefits managers or the benefits staff that are involved in some of that day-to-day administration of the plan, that reduced time commitment, almost unanimously they've said, hey, yeah, if I could outsource that and not have to worry about it, I would gladly give up that responsibility. And even senior HR people have said, yeah, if I can free up my benefits person to be able to work on other things, like that's a good deal for us. So that's, while there's the fee savings, which are hard dollars, it's easy to see that reduced time commitment, even at the benefits staff level, can be significant in terms of those indirect cost savings.
Oops. Okay, so what are the disadvantages that would then come around with a PEP? Well, similar to the advantages that you would have if you had your own plan, the disadvantages would be less customization and control. Okay, so you will have to adopt what the provisions of that particular PEP provide. So a great example would be whether or not there's a brokerage window. Some PEPs have them, some don't, but that would be the decision at the PEP level versus something that you would have access to. You may need to conform some of your secondary provisions in terms of number of loans, et cetera. But more than likely, these are things that don't drive the employee value proposition anyway. And then obviously, if you do switch, you have a transition. This would be true whether you move your own plan from one record keeper to another or move to a PEP. You would have that blackout period, and then the cost to go through that initial startup. So, once again, the disadvantages tend to be things that your employees may or may not value all that much as compared to the efficiencies and the cost savings of the advantages that PEP could bring. All right. So let's take a look at where the industry is today. So there are many PEPs available to 401k sponsors because this has now been, we're in year 3 of its existence from the Secure Act in terms of, the development and the movement forward on PEPs. The 403B market, because that's a little bit more recent of a legislation change, that's still developing. So there's a couple today, but not as robust as where the 401k market is. We fully expect that to be on equal terms within a year or two as well. So who sponsors PEPs? Well, there's a wide variety of organizations that sponsor PEPs. You have your large consulting firms. that sponsor PEPs. You have record keepers that may sponsor their own PEPs. And also record keepers also have alliances with other providers of the PEPs as well. And then finally, you're going to be a lot of specialty boutiques that have entered into the PEP market as well. So the big variety in terms of organizations, in terms of their size and what they bring to the table. But what you do note, and this is critical, there are very big differences in the PEP providers. Okay. Now we list a few here. Fee structures being first. Now fee structures, most of the PEPs are going to be on a structure of a participant level fee based on the number of heads, and then an asset-based fee based on the size of the portfolio or the plan itself. However, there's going to be differences in how much they weight one versus the other. There are going to be key differences in how they're willing, how that payment is made. So some will allow flexibility to the plan sponsor to pay a portion of it themselves versus the employees. Some may mandate that all the money is paid out of employee accounts, and some are going to be flexible in terms of that amount. So there's going to be some key differences there. How about, and then the flexibility. So we go back to that design and the matching formula and the structure of the 401k. Some PEP providers are very flexible in how they will work with you in terms of that structure. Others may want a safe harbor design, for instance, and have them all structured, all the participating employers relatively structured the same. So that's going to be a key question to understand in terms of how flexible they'd be willing to be. The investment offerings, while they all at a very high level will offer a very similar in terms of categories of exposure for the participants to choose from, how they deliver that is going to be different. So for example, some PEPs out there will only have passive vehicles available. Some will have a mix of active and passive. Some will have investment offerings that are from their own company's funds. So there's going to be a variety of investment offerings. Also, the QDIA might be different amongst them. Most of the time, it's going to be a target date fund series, but sometimes it's a managed account. So there's going to be some key differences there. Insource and outsource, we're going to talk about that in more detail here in a second, so I'm going to skip that for now. And then obviously the size of the PEP provider will be different. And this is important because you want to make sure that there's good fiduciary support in terms of process and governance and the ability to help generate additional well thought out guidance around how to manage that plan going forward. So let's see here. All right. Michael, you want to hit forward? Or for some reason, it's not forwarding for me.
It looks like it's updated on the screen. It's showing the governance model with the three different steps.
Well, then I'm going to have to go off memory, so I'm not seeing that. So let's see if I could get that resolved.
And there might just be a little bit delay on your screen, Tom, because it is moving around.
Okay, well then I apologize because I'm driving everybody crazy. So, but no, my screen has frozen. So up there it should be showing that the governance models in terms of the insourced versus outsourced, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So for insourced versus outsourced, here what we're focused on is basically three categories. We have category one, which I think is labeled PEP A. Here, that what you will see is this would be for somebody who insources for all of the various functions. Okay, so each of the functions would be done by that organization. There's pros and cons to that. Obviously, a pro would be a one-stop shop. The cons are, how likely are they to remove themselves from one of those key features if they weren't meeting expectations? The next one would be one that outsources all three elements. Here you can flip some of that advantages and disadvantages around. So by virtue of them outsourcing all of it, they're looking for best in class. However, you're going to be working with three different organizations in terms of that. And then the last one's a hybrid approach. Now, we show one example of a hybrid approach here, but this would be where some elements where the organization who's sponsoring the PEP feels that they are best in class in a certain area and will provide that service, and they would look to outsource another area for that. So, all right,
I could go ahead and advance it for you, Tom, if you want.
yeah, well, it's just that I'm not seeing it. That's all.
Yeah, the next slide is around
Yep.
the
Governance
contracts.
model, the contracts, right?
Yep.
So as we look at the contracts, the other thing, the key to know as you look at differences between the PEP providers is really to peel that contract back a little bit to look at the fiduciary responsibility that they are assuming. What we've noticed is they all don't necessarily assume the same level of fiduciary responsibility. And it's important to know what is and what is not being assumed in those contracts in that. So that's just another key difference to keep in mind as you look at different PEP providers. And then we want to spend a little time talking about what should be considerations in selecting a PEP. Okay, we've covered a lot of this already. So plan design, obviously, benefit formulas and compensation definitions. How much of that, do you care that if it's the same as other participating employers, or do you want that independence for those definitions? That will dictate the level of which PEP providers will make the best fits, and obviously the ancillary. In the investment lineup, the QDIA is going to be one key difference between the different providers, as well as whether or not they have proprietary funds versus external fund managers. Do they offer CITs, which tend to be cheaper than the mutual funds? And obviously, like in our example, for us, having a brokerage window is very important to that responsibility. And then the fee arrangements. We covered a lot of this already, but just looking at the different fees, there's going to be a wide difference in terms of the fees that are being, how they're organized and how they're presented, and the amount of fees. So if we move on to looking at who should be considering a PEP, we'd come up with a schematic here where we are looking at the size of the plan and the relationship to those three key factors: fee savings, fiduciary risk, and time savings. And so for smaller plans, we see things like fee savings being a major component of it. But that fee savings, as the size of the plan gets larger, will probably diminish a little bit in retrospect to how they are, those fees today. But what you see as you move up in terms of the size of the plan is that the time savings and the fiduciary risk those are going to be greater savings as you move up. So for large plans where they might be spending a material amount of time, we see that time savings being reduced. Obviously, the larger the plan, the greater the risk of any non-compliance issues or legal issues. And so therefore that we would see that be materially reduced as well. So to us, PEP plans have benefits to all organizations. There's no kind of one size fits all or ideal size where one plan might be too large versus another or not an ideal fit. We think depending on how you value these various different elements that a PEP can make sense for any size plan. Okay. So I think we want to take a look at a couple case studies.
Yeah, I'll take it from here, Tom. Yeah, we want to bring this to life for people just to see what this potentially looks like. And we've got three specific case studies that we'll go through, and a fourth, if we get time, we'll talk through it as well based on a recent conversation. The first case study we want to talk about, we've wanted to highlight the wide range of fees. As Tom mentioned, PEPs as a standalone retirement plan vehicle, we're in our third year of them. Which is still in its infancy, you can argue, as far as the industry is concerned. And because of that, there's quite a bit of fee disparity that exists out there in the marketplace right now. So we helped a company that currently sponsors a plan, a 401k plan with $25 million in assets and about 1,200 participants. They have a name brand record keeping platform. They have a regional investment consultant that helps them out, and they have a safe harbor plan design. Now, as part of their investment lineup, their qualified default investment alternative, their QDIA, is an active target date fund series. And so we went through just to start this process with them and tallied up all of the fees that are paid to run and support that plan. So that included the investment management fees, consultant fees, auditor fees, record keeping fees, everything that they were paying to manage their plan on an annual basis. And we tallied that up and came up with a total of around $220,000. And that does not include the internal staff time, whether it's committee meetings, the benefits manager, and the time that she spends on the plan. And so $220,000 plus the internal staff time was that baseline cost that we were dealing with. Now, recognizing that some of the pooled employer plan providers have as their QDIA a passive target date fund series, we wanted to make sure that we had an apples to apples comparison with those providers. So we went through and made the assumption and said, all right, assuming that all of their fees stayed the same in terms of administration and record keeping costs, if we moved them from an active target date fund series to a passive target date fund series, what would the total cost be then? And we came up with $154,000. Now that disparity in cost, we're not to say which one's right or wrong. They made the decision to go with an active target date fund series. They find value in that. But this is just so that we could have an apples to apples comparison with the other providers. So we went out and gathered 9 different proposals from major providers in the pooled employer plan space. And this includes name brand record keepers as well. 3 of those proposals included an active target date fund option. And when we summed up all of the fees related to joining the PEP, we came up with annual fees ranging anywhere from $130,000 to $215,000. So you can see at the low end, it's a substantial reduction in fees, let alone, we haven't tried to quantify the internal staff time when you factor that in there and the amount of responsibility that the PEP takes on. It would be a very significant change for this particular company to move even to that active target date fund series with the lowest cost option. But you can see substantial range in those 3 proposals as well in terms of their fee offerings. Now, 6 of the proposals that we received came from PEPs that have a passive target date fund option. So you'd expect that to be cheaper compared to their current setup of the 220. But on the range of the passive target date fund PEP providers, we got quotes as low as $105,000 and as much as $180,000. Most of those being less than what it would be if this company were to just move themselves to a passive target date fund setup and kept everything else the same. So this, again, gives you a sense for what we were talking about, that there is the potential for substantial fee savings depending on a plan's current setup. That's not insignificant. The ones that we've run, we've seen fee savings anywhere of 25 to 50% in the ones that we've looked at. All right, our next case study, we've titled A Major Upgrade for Less. And this one's near and dear to us. We mentioned we joined a pooled employer plan earlier this year. This is actually our case study here. So we have a very small plan, approximately 55 participants. We had a record keeper technology platform that was probably, I don't know if we qualify it as 3rd tier, maybe. Not a lot of bells and whistles, not a lot of financial wellness offerings and other things that would make our employees' lives easier. So we went out to the marketplace. We did a full-blown RFP, collected proposals from 7 different PEP providers. And when we summarized those and had some finalist meetings to get record keeper system demos, when it was all said and done, we selected a pooled employer plan that ended up reducing our total fees by 25%. And that's the hard dollar direct savings. That doesn't include the indirect cost savings from the time and effort that we spent internally managing the plan. And we did our own internal investment consulting work. We also upgraded to a record-keeping technology platform that included a lot more services for our employees in terms of financial wellness tools and the different capabilities that it had. So in this case, we got a substantial fee reduction and improved services for our employees by going through this process and moving to a PEP. And then lastly, this is one that we've entitled, What Aren't They Telling You? In this particular case, we haven't actually run the RFI for the plan, but we've had discussions with them. This particular entity has over 500 million in assets, over 2,500 participants in their plan, so it would be considered on the large end of things. They have a top-tier record keeper. They fully outsource their investment management, and they spend significant time internally managing the plan on an annual basis through committee meetings and the audit. In this case, they have two separate committees, one that only looks at administration and another that only reviews the investment offerings. And those committees have senior level people on them. So in our discussions with them, we've pointed out to them that their current providers that they use also offer pooled employer plans. And we've asked them, we said, hey, have your providers approached you about moving to their PEP? And to date, none of them have. And this is something that we touched on at the beginning, but is a function as to why or what's the impetus for PEPs growing. Right now, there's not a lot of incentives for some of the providers to move current clients into their pooled employer plans. Now, that's not true for everybody. Some of them will do that, but it's not ubiquitous across the market. Some investment consultants, as an example, would not be incentivized to be able to show a client or show them what moving to a PEP would look like, especially if that meant that they would potentially lose business. In fact, we had a conversation with a company, a different company, not too long ago. It's an $80 million plan where we talked to them about the potential benefits to joining a pooled employer plan. They went and talked to their current investment consultant about it, and their current investment consultant said, oh, we looked into it. You're too big to benefit from a PEP. Now, hopefully from the information that Tom had shared going through the pooled employer plans, you can see that it's more than just fees. And in this case, there's lots of benefits for a plan of $80 million in joining a PEP. But there's a huge conflict of interest here, as the advisor doesn't have a PEP. So if this particular company were to move into a PEP, they'd lose business. So it makes sense that they're not out there promoting it or saying, oh, you know what, it's probably a good idea to look at it. You should definitely consider that. All right, so that said, having talked about the current plan landscape, what pooled employer plans are, how they can potentially benefit you, Tom, what should people be thinking about as far as next steps?
Great. So as we see it, if you are interested in exploring what a PEP can bring to you, we suggest the following steps as laid out here. The first being just the RFI, a very simple process to get a feel for pricing and for the differences within the high-level differences between the various PEPs. And once that stage is complete and you gather that information and you're still interested in going further, which we believe you would be, you would want to do a request for proposal, which is a more thorough. You definitely want to get the demonstrations, have the conversations with the people who would be responsible for your plan and administrating it, but also to look at the record keeping system. We think the record keeping system is important to make sure you're getting that demo because it is probably less likely that a PEP provider will change out the record keeper than it would change an investment lineup or perhaps the third-party administrator. So it's very important that you get comfortable with the record keeping provider that would be there. And then obviously there'd be the transition period if once you make a decision to pick one. And then there'd be the ongoing PEP monitoring, which we talked a little bit about earlier, where as a fiduciary, you're going to have that responsibility to continue to make sure that the PEP provider is doing exactly what they're doing and is still the right PEP provider for your participants. And so we would think that would be more of an annual experience, but obviously some organizations might want to do that more frequently or less frequently than that, but we would suggest every year. We also think that as you approach this, it would be, for all the reasons Michael just went through, it's important to either you take this on or hire an independent party to do this. Hiring your own consultant, we just have our experience, and it's unfortunate, is that conflict of interest will present itself, and you're much better off getting an independent view of that. And so how can we help? Well, as Michael alluded to very in the beginning, we are very excited about the PEP landscape. We think that this is a change that's going to happen throughout the U.S. If you look at other countries that have gone through this change, whether it be Australia or Europe, you will see that this is now the commonplace for how to deliver defined contribution savings and retirement plans. So we think it's not a if, it's a when going to go forward. And so we want to position ourselves that we can be that independent view of the PEP market, helping you decide, does it make sense for you? And if it does, which organizations out there would be the best fit for you? And then finally, what are the key components here? Obviously, education, understanding a PEP, understanding the details, what's going to happen in transition, the fiduciary responsibility, making sure you have all those details and know what the marketplace provides. If your current provider does come to discuss with you with a PEP, that's terrific. It may be a great PEP for you, but you owe it to your participants and to your own organization to make sure you've gone and looked at a handful of different PEP providers to make sure that truly is the best fit. But we also understand that not everybody is going to be the right fit for a PEP, and for all the reasons that we named earlier in terms of control and customization, and if you are receiving value for that effort that you're putting in. And then, in a real high summary, we see PEPs and moving it is very, I like using the analogy that it's kind of like healthcare benefits and delivering that today, where, that's usually driven by a couple different providers out there. Whoever you have chose, you still control a lot of the plan design, but a lot of it's been outsourced. And we think moving to a PEP just makes tremendous amount of sense for most organizations out there, and really still allowing you to control the elements of a retirement plan and a savings plan that matter most to employees, but then outsourcing and gaining all those benefits of consolidation and aggregation that you can then deliver those benefits to your employees through that method. And at the same time, reducing your company's fiduciary risk and responsibility.
All right. So with that, we've got time for some question and answer. Again, if you've got a question, go ahead and submit it through the Q&A pane that is on the webinar platform. We've got a couple of questions, Tom. Let me start with, there's one around non-discrimination testing. So we talk about plan design and the benefit design here. How does that work if you've got within a pooled employer plan, if you have one employer that has a safe harbor plan design and another one that does not?
No, they each would still stand on their own. So the testing would be by the participating employer level. So it'd be no different than what it is today. Excellent.
And then another question that we've gotten a lot, and it's one that we think there's substantial gray area to, is whether or not evaluating a pooled employer plan would be considered a fiduciary decision or a settler decision. I was actually with a group of people last week that included some ERISA attorneys, and when I brought this up because I was curious to get their take on it, because I think the majority of people, just their initial inclination is to say, well, this is a settler decision. It's very much like the decision to offer a 401k plan or how much money we want to contribute to a 401k plan via a match or a non-elective contribution. Those are all company decisions that there's no fiduciary bearing to. Now, the fiduciaries have the responsibility of carrying out whatever the company decisions are and making sure that they do so in a compliant manner. And some people have said, yeah, the decision to join a pooled employer plan is very much this in that same vein. However, when you start looking at some of the examples that we've shown today too have highlighted this, if there's an opportunity for you to be able to provide the same type of benefits and enhanced services with potentially lower fees, that seems like in acting in the best interest of plan participants, that would fall under the fiduciary decisions, right? And trying to figure out the best way to deliver the benefits that the company has decided to provide. So it's a tricky question, which is why we go back to the notion that every employer really should analyze what moving to a pooled employer plan would look like for them and their employees. There's most likely going to be a compelling reason one way or another for you to either join a PEP or decide not to. Tom, one other question that we've gotten, why would somebody decide not to join a PEP?
Well, it's obviously it goes back to the big equation that there's something element of their savings plan that they feel is adding significant value versus what you could receive through a PEP. So more than likely, that's going to be either through some of the ancillary plan design. Maybe they want to have a number of loans, and that's important to their participants to provide that. Or perhaps there is some element within the investment lineup that's going to be critical to them that they can't find out in the PEP community. However, I think, as sophisticated as the PEP providers are becoming, I think that's going to be a harder one. You may limit how many PEP providers maybe offer certain types of offerings. If something like for us, a brokerage window was very critical. So that limited the field a little bit, but nonetheless, we were able to find a number of providers. But I think it's really, there's some element of that plan design probably that is critical to that organization for whatever reason. And unfortunately, the PEP community may be not able to deliver on that. But I think the other reasons are going to be, other than that, it's going to be controlled and just a desire of the committee that enjoys talking about investments and making choices. So,
Tom, maybe you can talk for just a minute too. When we went through this process as a company, what was the driving force behind looking at a pooled employer plan for our plan and our employees?
Well, I mean, it started with the idea that we think this just makes sense longer term. And you hit, earlier when you showed our case study, where we're not a large organization, we're growing, but we're not that large, and we have a decent size 401k balance. But it really came to where we want to spend our time internally and where we see the value. And maybe everyone will put a little smile on their face, but we really want to spend our time with our clients and thinking about how to help best solve their solutions. And not spend, while we could pick all the best investment managers, and we're very confident we could pick top tier investment managers, we also realized that the fee savings we generated would probably more than pay for any of the alpha generated from the managers that we were picking versus what we could find elsewhere. And so it just became very apparent that we didn't have a good reason not to move to a PEP. And that was it was a unanimous decision by the investment committee that overseeing the 401k plan.
We had another question come in from one of our attendees today. Do pooled employer plans provide employee education? That's obviously an important element for a number of companies. And as we saw from the plansponsor.com surveys, it's an element that employees are looking for. Not only do they want the opportunity to save, but they want that education on how to best plan for and prepare for retirement.
Yep, and the answer is a very simple answer of absolutely. And this would be a key area. I believe that, negotiation can occur too with the PEP providers in terms of a specific employee. But I think every record keeper and PEP provider out there understands the importance of education. And you might see different levels of that between the PEP providers, but I think also the style of which it's delivered that is one area where I think there's flexibility in the market in terms of how it's delivered. Excellent.
Well, we want to thank everyone today for joining us for this webinar. Hopefully it's been insightful for you. If you didn't catch the full webinar, it is being recorded. That recording will be sent to you after the fact today. So you'll have a chance to catch what you didn't miss, or if there's parts that you want to rehash or show a colleague, feel free. We do have a couple of other items that'll pop up on your screen when we're done here, but again, wanted to thank everyone for their time today and highly encourage you to look at pooled employer plans.
Thank you all.